Wonderful it is to see so many lovely faces here today, but frankly, after being laid to rest almost 200 years ago, it's quite nice to see any faces at all. My name, as said, is Dr. Thomas Waller, and has anyone heard of the community of Alexandria? The story begins in 1774. I was born in Stafford County, Virginia, and my wife, my bride Elizabeth, and I made our way down the Ohio. We caught a ferry boat in Wheeling, West Virginia, and made our way down the Ohio to Alexandria, Ohio in 1801. A lovely community nestled just on the banks of the Ohio and Scioto rivers, a small community. But after a few short years, we found from the ravages of the flooding from the Scioto River, it was quite impossible to have an established community there. So a dear friend, Henry Massey, laid out a plat of Portsmouth in 1803, and slowly some of the folks from Alexandria made their way across Scioto River and up the bank to Portsmouth, and we began to settle in Portsmouth. Built a log cabin just down the road on what is now Front and Court Street. I was the first physician in the county, but I actually wore many hats. My home also served not only as the first hospital, but also as the first pharmacy, as I was the first pharmacist in Scioto County. When the city of Portsmouth was established and became incorporated in 1815, I became the first postmaster of the incorporated city of Portsmouth. I was one of the first surveyors in Scioto County. 1815, at our first city council meeting, I became the first president of the first city council of Portsmouth when we were established. Another hat that I wore, as the community grew, we found the need for a bank. So the first commercial bank of Portsmouth was established in the late 18-teens, and I became, guess, that's right, the first president of the first bank of Portsmouth, Ohio. On Sundays, my day of rest, I gave that day to the Episcopalian Church, where I also became the first warden in 1819. My wife Elizabeth and I bore 9 children during that time, and I'm sad to say I did not see my children grow to the adulthood, as I did all these things that I mentioned by the age of 49. I passed away in 1823 at the age of 49 from that same epidemic fever that ravaged and took the lives of so many of my patients in that area. It took my life. It was said at my death that I left leaving more friends and fewer enemies than any man in Scioto County. I purchased 104 acres off of Henry Massey. This land, known as Waller's Woods, just east of Gay Street, over to Union Street, bound on the south end by the river. We are sitting right in the middle of Waller's Woods right now. Welcome to Portsmouth, and thank you.
This year, we are doing another block. We're moving it down to the next block to complete. It's actually a little bit bigger than the space we just did last year. Some of the questions we got while we were doing it is, why are we tearing out the trees we already have? Because they're dying. That's why. Because a lot of the non-native trees that we had in there, these tiny little tree coffins. None of the money we used came from any tax dollars or the city matching. It actually came from grant funding and from tourism. That made everyone much more happy when they saw that we were planting trees and that's how we were funding it. This year, the funding is coming the same way. If you know the Hocking Hills, you know like 4 million people come there for the natural areas we have. And she sees the value of us taking those trees that everyone comes to see and replanting in our downtown Logan to draw those folks into downtown and to help revitalize downtown, which has been a community project between our CIC, our Chamber of Commerce, our tourism, our Logan Town Center, and our new mayor. He's really super enthusiastic all the time. And our city guys and city workers, I can't say enough about them, because every time Rick, our fearless leader, is like, okay, we're going to do this, and your guys are going to do that for us. And I think that's what's worked all these years. We're fortunate to have Rick, who leads us in all this. We also did another residential planting. Education-wise, we have done some programs. Also, me working for Soil and Water, I'm able to do a lot of tree sort of Goods from the Woods programs and things. So we do an Arbor Day, Earth Day program, but it doesn't fall on Arbor Day because of testing, so it ends up falling usually in May, and we serve 300 sixth graders, and that way pulling in several agencies that come in for that day down on the fairgrounds.
This is our 28th year. We're really excited and we're very proud of being in Tree City, USA. Fortunately, we have a really strong tree commission in the city of Athens, and a lot of our residents are real tree aficionados, and it makes a difference in terms of what we're trying to do. Our neighborhoods are very unique in of themselves in terms of one street will have a number of residents that, I don't want trees. And then the next street over, if you touch a tree, you're going to be on the front page of the paper. It's really unique, the dynamics of just one neighborhood. Some of the things that we're getting involved in this year, we are doing our second American Bloom Tour. We're going to kick off that on July 26th and 27th. But we're striving to be a 5-star or 5 bloom city from a tour standpoint for these folks that come in and take a look at our town. Being a university town, 70% of the geography is owned by the High University, and that partnership for something like American Bloom is really important. Another thing that we've always done is we have what's called Athens Beautification Day. It's another partnership with the High University where we get probably around 1,000 volunteers, and we go out and do stuff to make Athens look good. Well, some of that stuff revolves around trees. So this year I have some city projects where we're going to plant 20 2-inch caliber trees in various spots, and I just was able to get 800 tree saplings that we're going to have planted around the city. So I don't know if we'll get all 800 in the ground, but we're going to try hard with all the volunteers. We're doing some fun things.
They're definitely the best looking.
This group typically does all the work. We do have Ann to fall back on. Every time we get in trouble with one of these big storms or whatever, we call Ann. She comes down and says, that tree's perfect. It's the best tree in the park. And that's the one that falls the following week. I had one that had a hole in it big enough to crawl in. Well, that's habitat. You got around the middle. It fell. We've got into more of the remembrance trees to replace some of the fruit trees and all down in our parks. And it's made a big difference getting the oaks and these big sturdy trees planted, getting everything thinned out and trimmed. We've lost a lot of trees in the past 5 years. These big storms come through and it takes some of the most beautiful trees that you've ever seen. We won't see them at full growth, but our grandkids will, so that's the important thing.
No, you might.
It's been a good project.
One of the things that you all have been leaders in is American in Bloom. Could you expand on that a little bit?
I believe this is year 6. We actually made the Circle of Champions a year ago, which Athens you don't want to do. It threw us into communities like Aurora, California that has good weather 9 months out of the year instead of 3. And so it's harder and harder to win. But each year, these judges come to town and they give you ideas, things to improve on, things that will capture someone's eye or just help in the looks of your city. For the past 10, 11 years I've been in office, we look different, we act different, good things have come to us. And truly I think it has with some of the business growth and the attitude around the city is good. We're getting some homes cleaned up, a few of them torn down that need to come down years ago. People get excited, for gosh sakes.
Well, you also established a landscape code that requires developers to plant trees in all new developments. So how did that turn out so
Well,
far?
that's working real well. What we have is a lot of business along the boulevard. They blacktop from the footer to the curb. With the stormwater issues and storm drains, we're all undersized and some places non-existent. So with that saturation point, with the trees and the shade, that has made a difference. We found out the project was going on, and he said, it's too late, how about I just make a donation? So he made a donation of trees to somewhere else, and he still left some green space, but not like the ordinance said. And we let him get by with it. It's a multi-million-dollar outfit, so you can't argue. It's made a huge difference just in...
Without costing the city much either, you
No,
know?
it doesn't cost us really anything. We have done an awful lot, I guess, on beautification. All the 4 entrances, main entrances of the city now have landscape and signage, if you will. You're entering the city.
Last year, we joined forces with the Ohio Extension Service, a fruit tree pruning, and everybody enjoyed that. We had people coming in from driving about 2 hours away. We've got a tree planting Arbor Day, down at the gazebo in the park because we've 2 big spruce trees that need to come down eventually. So we're planting 6 more in there, and that's going to be a tree planting workshop.
Our city has started now the bees and the butterflies. So we came up with a brochure that shows the trees that are good for butterflies and bees. So that way we get the butterfly and the bee population back. Come next year, it's going to be in Belpre for Tree City USA.
Do a little bus tour.
We've got to go to all the big trees that are still left in your town.
Mike, you want to really make it good, bring him to Marietta.
That would be nice, it's the second city in Washington County. It's the oldest, but it's the second city in Washington County.
You guys, congratulations, 22 years. Pretty inspiring to have watched Belpre grow and change over the last 20-some years. Our next community is Chillicothe. I thought you guys were one of the oldest city in Ohio. I found out Portsmouth is just as old today. So you guys are getting your 23rd consecutive award. Congratulations, Walt.
On behalf of the city of Chillicothe, I would like to bring in the Park and Rec Department because they're an integral part of our work, and the Tree Commission. We thank you much for this honor here. I was going to regale you with a lot of statistics, but as I walked out of the house this morning, I kissed my wife, slammed the door, and got in the truck and went over and picked up Whitey. Now, I don't know whether it was the kiss or the fact that in getting older, my mental capacity is declining. I'll go for the former as an excuse.
He forgot
But in any case, I forgot to report. I was really pleased to hear the Portsmouth Mayor Johnson's commentary. Administrations are certainly key to tree commissions. In Chillicothe, I have been through 3 administrations. Each of them are different. It really sometimes doesn't matter which party is there. But certainly they are different and sometimes more difficult or more easy to work with. Right now we're in a kind of an easy period. We got an excellent mayor in my opinion, and he allows us to do things. And that goes a long way towards these guys. That really helps in attitudes and what you can do. For example, Jim over there persuaded the Park and Rec director to buy the tree commission $1,000 worth of equipment, including a battery-powered chainsaw. Now, we do a lot of pruning ourselves. That went a long way. That never happened before in the history of 23 years. We've come a long ways in administrations count, educate them as best you can, work with them. 2 statistics I'll leave you with. Last year in 2017, we planted 194 trees in Chillicothe. The streetscape, which is about a 6-block area in downtown Chillicothe, held 142 trees before we started in 2015. A lot of them were white ash, all going downhill. By this time next year, we probably will have replaced every tree in downtown Chillicothe. This year we're going to take down 10 more trees, plant them back. But there are some residuals. They're still doing well, a different variety of species. We watch those now. We're kind of proud of the fact that downtown Chillicothe will have almost every tree replaced by next year. Conversations among us are that we may move out into what we call the historic district, about another block out.
Made bigger planting spaces for those trees,
Yeah.
right? You've enlarged the tree coffins.
That's Chillicothe in a nutshell. We planted, I said, 194 trees last year. So far this year, we planted 46. That's the only 2 statistics I'm going to give you.
It's pretty good.
We do qualify for Tree City, obviously.
Tree Commission, we have 6 men, 5 are degreed foresters, and the one who is not, which is my father here, is the most knowledgeable guy I know about nature, plants, trees, and birds. So we have a pretty sound group to work with. The woman that we have is great with a shovel, so I think that's going to enhance our work.
She's also a psychiatrist.
Sunday was my 88th birthday, and there's some question on whether I became a year wiser or a year more senile. And if my memory does not fall completely apart, I can complete for you the poem that was started this morning. I think that I shall never see a girl refuse a meal that's free. A girl whose loving eyes not fixed upon a drink that's being mixed. A girl who doesn't like to wear lots of junk to match her hair. But girls are kissed by guys like we, because we're not going to kiss a tree.
Chillicothe, when I started working with Chillicothe, they never got any money from their city administrations. Last year, I think Walt said they were budgeted, was it $25,000 in the city budget? Despite your inappropriate statements about women. Okay, not yours, but you still got funded. So good job. Marietta, save us, okay? One of the oldest Tree City USA communities in Ohio and in the United States. We're 1 year behind our oldest Tree City USAs with 39 consecutive years of being in Tree City USA. Come on down, get your award.
My name's Todd Stokel. I'm the street superintendent with the city of Marietta. I've been the superintendent for over 19 years. I can remember when I first started going in administration to do odds and ends at the counter, see the Tree City USA, you know, with the stamped trees on it. They got a real nice plaque, and as I worked through the ranks as a laborer and then onto a truck driver, I got to experience more working with people that were chosen, thanks to the mayor administration, for picking individuals that were dedicated, sincere, cared about it. I think the city in whole has really increased significantly in that sense. If people move in are a little questionable, I think they know from a neighbor that knows the tree commission, knows that we take it serious. The trees are very important to us. So it gets passed around. It's got a good solid root base, if you will. Now, we have experienced some dead trees, ash trees. Maples are taking a hit. I think we planted 103 saplings last year, and about 28 with root balls actually in the fall. So we're trying to catch up, but we're doing it with a pretty systematic way. It's not just one or two people. It's his whole administration down to his assistant, our safety service director. Cheyenne does a great job. She takes a lot of initial calls in.
She's my secretary. She screens them for me.
And she does a real good job, and she helps distribute it. I go out, I do a lot of inspection. I get with my work crew and ask them if they feel confident working on particular trees before I say, okay, we got to take this down. We've got an old bucket truck that it's pulling us through. Hopefully things get better financially for all cities within Ohio. Get a little bit more funds coming in to buy the necessary equipment. It's expensive equipment, but with it you can do so much more, and safely too. So in addition to that, we have AEP that works really good with us. They do us a lot of favors, helps us out tremendously in trees that are completely out of our ballpark to do. And they have the contractor Ashland. The mayor knows the higher ups with AEP, and that helps us with solving some problems, especially for the community and the safety aspect. That is definitely priority number one. I mean, trees are beautiful, but when they become a nuisance or in danger, it's got to be acted upon.
I'm a village council representative and one of 3 members of our tree committee. Be here today, and I really appreciate being able to get out of work too. So it's not all. Our operations crew with the village has done a fantastic job, and we really are lucky that we have such a great line in the village. We always have financial lines items for trees and for tree maintenance. We spent every last dollar of that last year, and I know that we did a major community care effort last year with the trees we had. We unfortunately lost 4 ash trees. We are fairly lucky that we did not have as many ash trees as some communities. To tell you how much our village council and administration love trees in the town, we actually joked that we needed to send our former mayor on vacation when we took those trees down because he was going to be so devastated to see them leave our main street. The great news though is that we replanted all of those old maple trees in some of our historic districts. Then we had a new person, we had a very large maple tree that was completely dead and needed to be removed. It was sad, and it was removed, and it was in between two properties. One property was a gentleman who was on village council for many years. The other was someone who had just moved in a week before and didn't quite understand that he was now on the spot for paying for 1.5 trees to be put into his tree lawn. My husband actually talked to him about it. Through my work with the village, my husband knows what to tell them about the importance of trees and convince this young man and his growing family, they have a toddler as well, how important trees are. And even though he got stuck with part of the bill, unknowingly, he was excited and happy to be part of it. And I think that education is one of the things that's so critical for getting community support for trees, tree lawns.
And I know many of you heard this, what I think is a great quote from my husband. Every crisis is an opportunity for greater closeness. So I have to remember that when I'm walking into those Marietta property owners.
This year, we also, this is a project, a tree planting that happened several years ago, but we dedicated and took over the maintenance of a very long stretch of new road in the development at the end of the year. So those trees are now going to be part of the village tree lawn rather than private property. And we do have in that development an agreement, as other communities do, to have tree lawns incorporated within development. The struggle with that is that they planted all the same tree rather than doing a variety of trees as we had asked them. As that development grows, we will be encouraging more diversity. Disaster relief was something on our docket. Trees are part of our disaster maintenance, and we had the derecho several years ago now. We got federal funding to help us clear some of the trees that fell. Having those plans in place, the thing that I get to do, talk to a whole bunch of second graders about the importance of trees, and they'll be part of our Arbor Day celebration and plant a sweet gum tree. To be official. We are 37.
I knew you were one of the older ones too. Our host community, Portsmouth. And as we've discussed, you're receiving your 25th year award.
Well, I don't have jokes or poetry, but I have many thanks to give all of you for making the trip to Portsmouth and spending the day with us. Most of the time has been spent with all of us working together to educate, get business owners knowing, hey, there's value in your trees. This year in particular, to celebrate our 25 years, not only are we hosting this, but we received $6,000 to assist us in planting a citywide tree campaign. We're leveraging that to double it, and we should be getting about 50 trees.
It is next week. We're partnering with Scioto Soil and Water for the Tree City celebration that we have been, this is our 3rd year. It's always a big day, it's a long day, but everybody has a lot of fun. Shawnee State, they grow these trees from seeds and these little saplings, and they give them all away at the Tree City celebration. It's a real fun day. There's always entertainment and vendors, and it's kind of a preview to our farmers market that starts in May. I also wanted to mention the people that from Friends of Green Lawn.
I want to recognize you for putting this on. This is a great program, it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort. This is on behalf of the ODNR. It's in recognition for putting on Tree City USA Award program.
Give it to the appropriate person.
All right.
Yeah. Bill kind of is grumpy sometimes. Yeah. He'll do it, then he'll grump about it. We love him, and he's our service director. He does a good job.
Hardest job in city government.
Yes, it is. Well, thank you all for coming.
Our last community is Zanesville. Zanesville's been at Tree City USA for 21 years.
Shawnee State University, thank you for shining your lights for us today. I'm the retired one, that's why I'm here today. And I consider this quite an honor. Zanesville's like a lot of communities, we're having trouble with our canopy. We keep losing it, we keep trying to replace it. Many of you have very good luck. Some of us are lagging behind. It's a big job just to keep those trees planted and coming along. We had some setbacks in the last few months. Last year's trees will be planted this month. There were problems digging them late last fall. On a sad note, we've had a good bit of vandalism and some downtown trees this past year, right out in the open where everybody can look at and people can walk by. A couple of things that we've done that I've enjoyed is just the Arbor Day planning. We've started associating ourselves with elementary schools just so we can have children there in attendance, recognizing the need and for planting the tree, benefits of the tree, the beauty of the tree. And I think those bright little faces that you see when a tree is being planted and they actually are helping to plant it, Hopefully we'll have future replacements on our shade tree commissions and people interested in planting trees in our communities. We all should be aware of it. Historical cemeteries and historical trees brought to our attention in Zanesville this past year. It's an old pottery town. We've had lots of money there the past century and a half. Money people came into the area. They started factories and potteries. But they also had an interest in trees in those days. So we recently found that we have overcup oak planted on property that belongs to Ohio University Zanesville. Overcup oak is not a normal resident of Ohio, but they've been there for over 100 years. Someone with interest in trees planted those. And I do volunteer work at Dawes Arboretum, and they were very interested in the fact that we had overcup oaks large enough to be there 100 years and still bearing fruit and being very plentiful. And we really had a bumper crop this past year. This young lady that pointed out that we had these overcup oaks growing, she said, "Buck, come and take a look at this tree." And we discovered that it was a water oak. Now, water oaks don't grow within 300 and 400 miles of Ohio itself. So the folks I'm associated with at Dawes were quite excited to find out that we had water oak actually growing in Ohio, 70 feet tall, been there at least 90 years. So we have made herbarium samples of that tree. It's old, it's still producing, but it's really a historical tree. So I think one of my jobs in the near future is to protect that tree somehow, either fencing it or putting lightning protectors. It's right out in the open on an old parkland property. Speaking of parklands, you might want to examine your own cemeteries and parklands.
We did the certified arborist training this past year, so I think that deserves some recognition.
I just passed it.
Did you pass? Buck alluded to some pretty significant vandalism that happened this fall in downtown with some beautiful ginkgos and trees that were just coming on and being beautiful. And I have to commend Buck and the other tree commissioners. They were really proactive. They met with the city. They let the service director know, who let the mayor know, who let the police chief know. And believe it or not, the police found out who the person was. They took action on it. That person was charged. It turned out that he was destitute and didn't have the money to pay restitution of it, but the process worked. It's easy for us to just be like, oh, not again, but we followed the process, and I think now, the city is kind of on it. And because of the press, I doubt that's going to happen again for a while. Congratulations to all the cities. We now want to recognize our Tree Campus USAs alphabetically. First recipient is Hocking College.
Well, thanks, Ann, for reeling me in. Kind of been charged with taking the Tree Campus USA at campus. We have a campus in Logan and a campus in Perry County at New Lex too, that we want to incorporate into this eventually. I do, however, want to mention Misty Wilson and Aaron Daughter. They come from the natural resource curriculum, and they took complete control over this inventorying and the situation involved with meeting the criteria. We're really spread thin with our workforce over there at Hocking right now, so I couldn't invest the time that I needed to keep this ball rolling. It's going to be very important to bring this young blood into this mix more than ever, and I actually charged them with doing a little bit of recruiting for me because they both graduate in May. So moving forward, I asked them just basically to interview some of their roommates, their different people in their classes and curriculums that may find an interest in this. What fascinated them was our trust for them to just take charge, go out there, and they exceeded every expectation that we ever had. They digitized pictures for us, and now we've implemented some plans for rescue of trees and maintenance of trees and basic plant health care, overall health care that has been neglected on campus for many years. I aspire to keep getting these kids involved with this so that I don't come to this by myself, but they can be acknowledged as well, put that on their job resume and understand the overall importance of all this.
It definitely takes a committee and support from the top down, right from the administrators to the people on the ground doing the work. If the guys that mow the grass are not part of it, you can plant all the trees in the world and they're not going to live. So. Next we have Ohio University. You guys are in it for your second year in a row.
On behalf of Ohio University, we want to give thanks for this award. There's a lot of hard work by a lot of people that goes into receiving this. This is our second award. My name is Matt Riley. I'm a utility locator with Ohio University Facilities Management. The two ladies with me are Jackie Klepfer. She's a researcher at the Voinovich School of Public Affairs, and this is Susan Calhoun. She's our landscape coordinator. We comprise the Ohio University Tree Advisory Committee. Our community, like many of yours, undoubtedly were affected by emerald ash borer, and we've been spending the past year removing a lot of our standing dead ash, concerned about the safety of those trees. When they die, they get brittle, as you know. We've treated some of them.
Did the injection.
We plan on treating those ash trees again next year in 2019. We're treating our Yoshino cherry trees for cherry leaf spot. We just started lighting them, and the Sakura celebrations have begun. So if any of you are near Athens, it would be a great time to pass through. It's a very, very beautiful scene to see along the bike path, all the cherry trees lit up. We're developing and implementing a integrated pest management plan so that we can sensibly and sustainably use any chemical inputs. We're inventorying our eastern hemlock trees using geographic information systems. Last year, our in-house groundskeepers, we planted about 50 trees. We had 12 trees that were displaced by construction projects, but instead of removing them, we transplanted them using an air spade technique. Of the 12 that we air spaded, 9 of them lived. Getting ready for Earth Day and Arbor Day. We expect our president, Dr. Nellis, he'll be there. Some former presidents may be there. We're giving away saplings. We've got a smoothie bike with pawpaws.
A children's book being read, Pawpaw Children's Book at the Down Child Development Center. Children are coming down to do a little reading session. The awards in the evening. Yeah. A tree system mapped out, a quiz, sapling, what we said. You said that, red buds, pawpaws, natives. Last but not least, Shawnee State University. You guys are getting your second year award as well.
We first wrote our tree plan. Dr. Kurtz himself actually had a hand in editing it initially. So I don't know how many university presidents actually take on that role, but he actually was.
As of this year, we have 160 different species roughly on campus. So it's not a large campus, but we do have a large diversity of the trees that we do have. We have in between 250 and 300 trees that we grew from seed in the greenhouse as of right now. And out on the tree tour, you guys will go through there and be able to pick up one Shumard oak. And we've been really focusing on native species or around native, Kentucky, Indiana, places like that. It'll grow, quite well. A lot of pecan trees. Kept back 5 different species to plant on campus that students have grown. So pawpaw, pecan trees, willow oak, southern redwood. Focusing on shade trees and shortcomings, I guess. We planted a lot more acorns and stuff than what came up. We planted roughly 1,300. 300 trees is not too shabby. So
from seed.
From seed.
Yeah, wild seed.
Yeah, wild seed. And we just recently planted 200 butternut.
I'd like to take a minute just to thank this guy right here, Logan. He's stepping up into some shoes. Some of you all know him, some don't. He's filling the slot that Bob Deal had here. The reflection of this, you'd have to agree, Bob, with getting us where we are. Logan grabbed a hold of it, and he took care of all this paperwork. Logan's made sure that it gets the recognition that it should.
Earlier, when Mayor Johnson was up here, he mentioned having come back to Portsmouth. I want to mention a couple other events that are going on. A symposium on visualizing Appalachia and the digital age going on.
A tree like this really symbolizes that commitment to the diversity of trees, the purpose of them, and hopefully, 5-10 years from now, this will be offering some fantastic shade for our students, faculty, staff, and visitors to hang out under here.
As Dr. Kurtz mentioned, the tree kind of gets some significance. Along this whole corridor, there was originally a whole line of these large English oaks. Some of you were asking about them. They were planted when Massey Hall was built back in the 60s. Unfortunately, because of the way they're shaped, a lot of them split and broke out during an ice storm several years ago. So we're gradually replacing them with larger native trees like this yellow poplar. And as the plaque reads, this is our 2018 Arbor Day tree. This yellow poplar was planted in commemoration of the Tree City USA, Tree Campus USA recognition event held on April 12, 2018. and co-hosted by the City of Portsmouth Shade Tree Commission and the Shawnee State University Campus Tree Advisory Team. Now, this tree was made possible through the generosity of actually two people that are here today, Dr. James Chapman and Dr. Ann Chapman, through their contributions to the Campus Beautification Fund. So we were able to use their kind donations over the years to purchase this tree, as well as many others that we're going to be putting in here on campus in the near future.
I'd like to ask the Chapmans to step forward.
We're honored by this, but we're just very pleased that this campus is continuing to beautify. We always wanted to have this as a place in this city and families feel comfortable and enjoy the beauty of nature.
Okay, so let's recognize the way here.
Right there.
Great, guys, on one.
Woo! Oh yeah, it'll anybody can join in and
Take all the pieces you want. Here, Art. Get up here. They're still taking pictures. Who's taking the picture? How about tree plants? Jim in there.
You guys look like you know what you're doing.
So, you know, anything you're interested in, just snag it up. This is just your plain strawberry begonia.
If you have any
Beautiful Swedish ivy. Octopus aloe.
No, this is the kind of thing.
We're actually going to plant a couple on campus. We have like a water runoff from a couple of the doors over there that have one of the
Yeah.
And I was able to take some of those sap balls and dilute them down in water, paint them on my ceramics, and then put glaze over it to trap the carbon underneath the ceramics. It made a rather dark brown effect, but that was kind of the expected.
Grapefruit tree.
Yep. And the sap does smell good.
Probably,
Get water.
this is a red. Oh, I was thinking Ryan could take one.
Do you see one that you like? I'm looking. Okay. I don't know which one it costs.
Yep. Must be big. Wow.
Yeah. Would you look up for a certain kind?
Because I always think of the upper side of the leaf as having this beautiful and but it does take up minerals. And they become, if not itself, not really justified that much because it's covered, but it's still serving a really good
Thanks for everything. This was wonderful.
Yep.
That.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Yes, this, it takes a lot of upkeep. We actually, a little fun fact about the greenhouse, we just released over
While we're in these territory, I love being out.
as a IPM, an integrated pest management, because we have a lot of problem with mealybugs in this area, and they've done a great job. This year we have not done any insecticide beside insecticidal soap, team-based soap to wash the spider mites. Yeah, and it's really not so much as spider mites as it is mealybugs in here. But those lady beetles came in and they just did a wonderful job. I mean, there's still some around, but we're actually going to implement that now as I hopefully corner. We try not to have really too many of one thing, just because we're limited on space. Fern table, we have a staghorn fern and rabbit's foot.
The church that my father's family built when they first came over from Germany is still standing. Is it? And it's a Confederate soldier. That's what it is. So it's Confederate soldiers. Oh, yes. Oh, no, dude. That's
Spent a lot of time in cemeteries because Nancy Aiken and I read many cemeteries. I don't know how many, but a lot. Most of them small. But she answered the question I had, and that is it active? Are there still open sites?
what they say. How do you find out?
Hello? Hello? Yes?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I'm in the car.
Oh, hi.
Okay, I'm in Portsmouth. It's an active cemetery, but they're doing things to, cool. Yeah, so they're receiving about 7.
friend.
Tonight's speaker is the 77th recipient of this award. Has been given to the likes of Walter Cronkite, Bob Woodward, Christiane Amanpour, Gwen Eiffel, Judy Woodruff, Seymour Hersh, and many, many more.
So up there right now is one of my favorite characters from the book. He is a Hawaiian. Before humans arrived on the Hawaiian Islands, the archipelago actually had several species of crows several 100,000 years ago. And it too is now extinct in the wild. Habitat loss, introduced species that preyed on crows and especially on their eggs, and the introduction of mosquitoes that carry avian malaria, which is a huge problem in Hawaii. So a few decades before the last wild alawas died out, people already realized the species was in big trouble. So they took every alawa they could locate out of the forest, or what's left of the forest, and they brought them to this breeding facility run by the San Diego Zoo on an entirely different island, on the island of Maui. And this is where Kanoe himself was born. And as he is, you know, as the saying goes, quite an odd duck. He was raised by people, so he doesn't really seem to see himself as a bird. One of the people who cares for him told me that he once fell in love with a spoonbill. Kanoe refused to mate with any of the other crows at this mating facility on Maui. They raised the population to about 120, so maybe 60 of them are females. And those are all the alawas left in the world. And Kanoe is quite old now. He's 25 years old. His genes are considered very important. So a few years ago, he was flown to California to the veterinary zoo, a veterinary hospital of the San Diego Zoo. And there he came under the care of a reproductive physiologist by the name of Barbara Durant. And every spring, so we're about to go into another cycle, and in fact I just checked with the folks in San Diego that Kanoe is still with us, I'm happy to say. So every spring when it's mating season back in Maui, Durant takes Kanoe on her lap and she strokes him in a way that he is supposed to find very, very stimulating. Hoping that Kanoe will divest himself of some of his genetic material, and he turns out to be a very charismatic, if sexually confused bird. He has this palatial cage, there's all these toys that they've provided for him. He hopped over to see us, and it seemed to me that he definitely recognized Barbara Durant. He seemed a little bit embarrassed to see her, but he did seem a little sheepish. He had brought him some snacks called Pinkies. They're baby mice that don't have hair yet. Crows, as I'm sure you all know, are very smart, and they can imitate human speech. And Kanoe says, "I know." And when he says it, it sounds a little bit demented. Kanoe sort of sums up this very strange, sad situation that we find ourselves in. Here we have this crow, one of the very last representatives of his species, and people are going to these fantastic lengths to save this species. They've set up this breeding facility. They are essentially giving hand jobs to crows. People really do care about animals, about what the writer Rachel Carson called the problem of sharing our earth with other creatures. But at the same time, we are, as a species, as you know, killers. We are driving more and more species, like the alawa, to the very brink of extinction. Kanoe, in his sort of black Hamlet-like getup, this oracular kind of cawing that he does, I know, he made a big impression on me. What is the sixth extinction? There have been 5 earlier such events. What you're looking at here is a very famous graph. It's an analysis of the marine fossil record, where you see those dips. Those are just points where the number of families in the marine fossil record suddenly dropped. So if one species from a family made it through an extinction event, that family counts as a survivor. Every one of those dips, 1 through 5, represents a loss of roughly 3/4 of the species on Earth. These are the 5 major mass extinctions, and they're sometimes just called the Big 5, when the diversity of life form plummeted. A British paleontologist uses the metaphor of the tree of life. During a mass extinction, vast swaths of the tree are cut short as if attacked by a crazed, axe-wielding madman. Number one there took place at the end of what's known as the Ordovician period. That was 400 million years ago. Most of life was confined to the oceans because that's all there was at the time. And the fifth event, number 5 there, that took place about 66 million years ago, and that was the event that did in the dinosaurs. That event was caused by an asteroid impact. To say that we're in the 6th such event is obviously a pretty serious claim to make. We're changing the world very radically and very, very fast, not unlike an asteroid impact. We, human beings, are the asteroid. How we're changing the atmosphere, the oceans, changing what Charles Darwin called the principles of geographic distribution. Let's start with the atmosphere. Every year, we humans are adding on the order of 10 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels. We drive our cars, we turn on our lights. There are 7.6 billion of us on the planet right now, and it adds up very fast. When we burn fossil fuels is we are taking carbon that was buried under the surface of the earth over the course of hundreds of millions of years, and we are transferring it back into the atmosphere. So we are basically running geological history backwards and at a very high speed. So if you were an alien and you came to visit Earth, you could easily conclude the primary purpose of modern industrialized society is to effect this transfer as quickly as possible. We ourselves are very carefully measuring CO2 levels in the atmosphere. This is one of the most famous graphs out there. It's known as a Keeling curve. It's a continuous record of CO2 levels for over 50 years. And that green line, that shows you where 400 parts per million. This is a very recent reading from Saturday. And every day you can go on, look up the Keeling curve and get the latest reading. There's a seasonal component to CO2 levels. They go down during the northern hemisphere summer when the tree plants in the northern hemisphere put out their leaves and start taking CO2 out of the air for photosynthesis. And they go up again when the trees and plants in the northern hemisphere go dormant in the winter. Just a function of the fact that we have more forests and really more land in the northern hemisphere. We've now probably gotten to the point where the reading will never go below 400 parts per million again, not in the lifetimes of anyone in this room tonight. And that number, unfortunately, is going to keep rising until we stop emitting CO2, which certainly, so far, we show no signs of doing. Just recently, it was announced that after a couple years of being steady, global emissions last year increased again. We want to know how well we're doing in terms of changing the atmosphere on a longer time scale. We have to go back and look at ice cores. We have 2 major ice sheets left on the planet, one in Greenland and one in Antarctica. And when you take an ice core, you just take that drill, it looks like a tube with some teeth at the end of it, and you set it spinning and you send it down through the ice sheet. Snow that's been laying down winter after winter and has not melted, so has accumulated over millennia. Scientists have figured out ways to go back and extract a lot of information from it. Temperature and actual bubbles of past atmospheres get trapped in that ice. This is a record that was taken from Antarctica. Reading left to right, 800,000 years ago on your left to today, and those are once again CO2 in the atmosphere in parts per million. And what you're seeing, those up and down cycles, those are glacial cycles. During the last ice age, which ended about 12,000 years ago, there were huge ice sheets covering New England, where I live, on Canada, and much of the upper Midwest. Last time around, during what's known as the Wisconsin glaciation, reached all the way into northern Ohio. Those high points, where CO2 levels are around 300 parts per million, those are interglacials when the ice retreats. And we are in interglacial right now. CO2 levels have probably not been above 300 parts per million for at least 800,000 years. And these are predictions into the future, and these come from a federal website that used to be up during the Obama administration, probably is not even up anymore. The green dot is where we're headed. If we work hard to keep our emissions down, so far we are not doing, and that yellow dot is where we are headed if we just keep on letting emissions increase year by year. So by the end of the century, CO2 levels will almost certainly be twice as high as they were before we embarked on this world-changing project, and quite possibly they will be 3 times as high. Turns out if you want to find CO2 levels that are higher than today's, We have to go back perhaps as far as the Miocene, which was about 20 million years ago. And we could easily, very easily, be reaching Miocene levels within the next couple of decades. We could very easily reach Eocene levels, so we weren't any humans around. We are a species that is only 200,000 or 300,000 years old. CO2 has certain geophysical properties that make it a greenhouse gas. This property of CO2 has been understood now for 150 years. Today, unfortunately, in 2018, we have a lot of people in very high government offices right now, including the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, who like to repeat this notion that the science on this isn't settled. Rubbish. Science on this has been settled since the 19th century. This is a machine that was invented in the mid-19th century by a British scientist named John Tyndall. And in it, he measured the properties of various gases. It's called a photospectrometer. And he realized right away in the 1850s that carbon dioxide had this property of trapping heat near the Earth, and that it was a very important gas in terms of our climate. So this next animation is by a British climate scientist named Ed Hawkins, and it's really beautiful, as you'll see, showing you what has happened to average global temperatures since what's known as the instrumental temperature record began, since we had reliable thermometers 150 years ago. And so the baseline that you're seeing here, against which this is revolving, is the average for that period. So that red line where it says 1.5 degrees C, that shows that the temperature is now almost 1.5 degrees C higher than it was when the instrumental temperature record began. Paris Climate Accord discussions, you know that there was an attempt in that document, it's a sort of aspirational target of limiting average global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees C or less. But as that animation showed, we are really already there. These are the 10 warmest years since the instrumental temperature record began. You will see that they all have taken place since 1998. 2014 was the warmest year until 2015, which was the warmest year until 2016, which really blew away the records. What does this mean in terms of living creatures with whom we share this planet? It's just a chart showing you temperature anomalies. It comes from it's very recent. It shows you where it's reddest. This is a chart produced by a radical scientist at NASA. It's where the colors are deepest red, that shows you where the warming is the greatest. And where it's blue, it shows you where temperatures are actually below in January. It was really, really warm in January in the Arctic. And the Arctic is warming particularly fast, an effect that was predicted a long time ago by the very earliest climate models. It's called the Arctic amplification. And it's the reason that the polar bear has really become this sort of icon of the dangers of global warming. The sea ice is melting very fast, and if you're a polar bear and you're hunting for seals off the sea ice, then you think, well, you might well be in big trouble. The effects of climate change are likely to be even more significant in the tropics. The tropics are simply where most of the species actually live. For example, trees. In this photo, we are looking down a ridge. We are very high in the Peruvian Andes, about 12,000 feet. And I went to this particular spot, so 1 hectare, 2.5 acres each, and in each of these plots, they had tagged and ID'd every single tree that had a diameter over a couple inches. So they had 20 plots arranged at different elevations down that ridge that we just saw. And in those 50 acres, they had found 1,000 different species of trees. Now, if you were to go to Canada's boreal forest, it covers almost 1 billion acres, so you'd only find about 20 species of trees. That species tend to have very narrow climatic ranges. So as we were hiking down, look along the path, pick out a leaf that has an interesting shape, and just watch as you go down this path and see how long you see that shaped leaf. Probably is only going to be a couple hundred meters. That's the tree's entire range where the climate conditions are now favorable.